How will the Elder Scrolls universe end? This is a question often answered by using vague terms from the stuff we know from the ending of Skyrim. The story usually goes, Alduin will eventually come back during the end of times and fulfill his destiny. It's common knowledge that in the ending of Skyrim, we don't actually stop Alduin forever. Alduin always existed and always will exist.
The eldest is no more. He who came before all others and has always been.
The exact specifics of what these end times are is unknown. As a matter of fact, we know nothing at all about the ending of the world. We don't even know what happens after the last Dragonborn kills Mirak, except maybe the events of Legends. The most we can guess is a third Akavir invasion. So how can we answer the question, how will the Elder Scrolls universe end? Well, bits and pieces of clues have been scattered all throughout this franchise. Pieces that certainly don't give a complete answer, but at the very least paint to a much clearer picture. For this video, I'm not gonna be referring to anything regarding the Amaranth. I'm only gonna be talking about the current Elder Scrolls universe. Originally, this video was gonna be part of the much larger video about Mankar Camoran, but given it ended up covering topics that go way beyond the scope of that video, I thought it would be better if I made a separate video about it. And yeah, some points will be repeated, but I'd rather just repeat some points than go way off topic. And with that, let us begin. Let us focus on the common information first. Alduin comes back during the end times and eats the world. Seems basic enough. Well, let us read between the lines of the last dialogue with Engir the Greybeard.
Dragons are not like normal mortal creatures, and Alduin is unique, even among dragon kind. He may be permitted to return at the end of time to fulfill his destiny as the World Eater.
Strange, isn't it? He doesn't say that Alduin creates the end times. He says that he might be permitted to come back during the end times. So it would seem to be the case that Alduin does not cause the end times. He only appears during them. What is even more than that, Paarthurnax states that Alduin doesn't even cause the end of all things. He only brings the end of the current cycle of creation, the Kalpa, so that another one can begin.
Perhaps this world is simply the egg of the next Kalpa? Lean Vokeen? Would you stop the next world from being born?
References to this idea of the Kalpa also exist in the Sermons of Vivek, the Song of Pelenol, and more importantly to this video, the commentaries on the Mysterium Xaxis. So now we know that end times don't refer to the end of all things within the universe, and Alduin does not necessarily cause them, but he seems to come back during them to finish the job. Paarthurnax also establishes that in between cycles of creation, there is a period where time does not exist, courtesy of the time god, Akatosh, no longer being around.
The next world will have to take care of itself. Fool Nilos. Even I cannot see past time's ending.
But we can go beyond even that. If we learn what happened to the previous Kalpa, we can get even more hints as to what might end up happening during our current timeline, and we gain exactly that knowledge during the second and fourth commentary on the Mysterium Xaxis. To cut a long story short and simplified, in the previous Kalpa, Tamriel was known as League. Isn't this awesome? We are all thinking of the same joke. League is a mirrored image of Tamriel. And like Tamriel right now is controlled by different deities, so was League. One of the main ones was Arkay, who back then was known as Mazdiak. But courtesy of the 9 coruscations and Sermon 28, we know that at the very least, Lorkhan, Gigolag, Ifrey, the daughters of Magnus called the Magna Gi, and maybe even Magnus himself, were also once at League. Even other Daedra, such as Mehrunes Dagon and Molag Bal, once inhabited League. In fact, Mehrunes Dagon was born in the bowels of League, and eventually he ended up destroying the place. A big question in the fanbase is, how come all these deities can exist in different Kalpas if Alduin eats everything? And well, we don't have an answer for this, only theories. It could be said that Alduin's eating isn't a distraction per se, but more of a reset button. It can also be said that these deities stand for different concepts, and when those concepts appear again, so do the deities that represent them. This theory holds some weight because Mankar Camoran never calls Mazdiak Arkay, but rather the Arcane, arcane, which is what RK stands for throughout the ages. The arcane is the very concept of life and death and guiding mortals through this process. Same is the case for Merunes, who began as merely an idea that stood for destruction, revelation, and ambition. This idea was called Merunes the Razor, but due to people worshipping him, he became Merunes Dagon. Sometimes things aren't as simple though. Jigolak, for example, in League, is referred to as the Divine Order, a force which held the world together, perhaps similar to the role Akatosh plays in Tamriel right now, but in our current Kalpa, he's a Daedra. Same is the case with Molag Bal, who went from a king of a civilized people to the god of domination. Although we can dabble in theories, the answer, as Paarthurnax says, is that we don't know and that we can know what happened in between Kalpas. So these details will be forever obscure from us. So how did League fall, and what can it tell us about the fall of Mundus? The story we know so far, according to the 9 coruscations and the commentaries, is this. League was once a land of slavery, as the mortals of League were bound to the whims of tyrant kings, and in the case of Mazdiak, jailer kings. The Magnagi, who are basically forces that enable transcendence, created a weapon to undo the status quo. That weapon was originally known as Merunes the Razor. At first, it began as an idea, revelation, ambition, and distraction, exactly what was needed to topple the oppression of the tyrant kings. So mortals kept praying and acting based on the principles of Merunes the Razor, and this devotion fueled it. And so it grew in strength until it eventually became the Merunes Dagon that we know today. And Merunes Dagon then proceeded to destroy League. A great rebellion began based on the principles of Merunes. Molag Bal fell to Merunes the Razor, and the order Jigolak stood for was also destroyed, and so was he. But most important is what happened to Mazdiak. Mortals rebelled against the very concept of mortality, and Mazdiak was killed, and his corpse was brutalized. But what resulted from these actions wasn't immortality, it was something far worse. Out of Mazdiak's wounds, a black pus began seeping out, and it spread all over the land. All throughout these documents, we find the word slave. It can be assumed that the term slave here doesn't refer to actual slaves the way we think of them, but rather it simply refers to people who are subject to the whims of higher powers and are controlled by them. Mazdiak wasn't a jailer king any more than RK is a jailer, which is to say, they aren't jailers at all. They just uphold the principles that they stand for, or at least that's just another theory. Again, the specifics are never made clear. What is relatively clear is that this liquid that poured out of Mazdiak infected the entire land, sickening everything. And this is the last thing that is known about League. I think it's safe to say that the bile got them. It destroyed the land. There is a theory in the community that this black bile eventually becomes Alduin, just how Merunes the Razor becomes Merunes Dagon, and the arcane can become Mazdiak. But either way, it can be assumed that at some point he comes by and eats everything. So now we know that Alduin does not cause the end times. He comes by during the end times and acts more so as a reset mechanism. What actually caused the end of the previous Kalpa was the rebellion that killed Mazdiak, and in doing so undid the very concept of life and death. Moreover, we now know that it's not a complete wipeout, as we see the remnants of the previous Kalpa in Tamriel right now, and this goes beyond just the divinities. The Dregs are the remnants of the people who once lived across League. Wow, that rhymed. But now they are feral, lacking any type of language skills. It's also worth mentioning that the rebellion destroyed the towers of Jigolak that existed in League. These towers upheld the order that existed in this place. Extremely similar towers also exist on Nirn, and they uphold the laws of Nirn. The question is, does a similar rebellion also exist on Nirn? And the answer, in my opinion, is yes. It's the Thalmor. The Thalmor seem to be a mirrored image of that rebellion. The Thalmor are deeply resentful about the current status quo in Tamriel, and it's not just the politics. In fact, for them, the political aspect seems to just be a sideshow. The Thalmor believe that the elven races were robbed of their divinity, and their mortality is a curse that has to be overcome. We know that they seek to bring a new Merithic era, and we also know that this isn't their final goal. In the College of Winterhold, they seek the Eye of Magnus, because it has the power to unmake the world.
The power to unmake the world at my fingertips. And you think you can do anything about it?
The Thalmor want to destroy the world and return to a state before the rules of the world were established, so they can be free and immortal spirits again. Sound at all familiar? It's the same story as Mazdiak and the Rebellion, and exactly like the Rebellion, their core arguments have some very good points, but their execution just leads to errors. In several texts that talk about the cosmology of the Elder Scrolls, mortals are at the best tools, and if we're being realistic, actual slaves made to serve higher powers. Vivek talks extensively about the slavery of mortals and about how so many of them have to die for only a few to rise beyond the world and become gods. Those would be people like Menemarko, or immortals like Mankar, who overcame the world before he was defeated in his own paradise. How is this fair? Even Talos acknowledges the suffering of his subjects for his sake. The Thalmor statement is simple. If we were once immortal spirits, then why are we now being sacrificed as mortals so that a select few other mortals can ascend? It's a good argument, but its execution is flawed. Is it that insane to assume that eventually they will undo the world enough so that another League situation occurs? There is a key difference between them and the original Rebellion. The Rebellion at League was maniacal and brutal. There are scenes describing horrific acts and massacres in their attempts to undo the world around them. And this wasn't just done against the divinities themselves, but they were also performed against the people that served those divinities. The Thalmor don't operate that way. They are in it for the long run. They're way more methodical. However, that doesn't mean they are any less dangerous. Is it a stretch to say that they are talking about Talos and treating Talos worshippers the same way that the rebels talked about Mazdiak and his followers? I don't think it is. So, is this the theory? The Thalmor are here to undo the world, and the universe is a huge game of this world exists only until a bunch of rebels decide that it shouldn't exist. Well, this would make for a good story, but again, there is even more to this story, because Parthenax also says this.
Those who try to hasten the end may delay it. Those who work to delay the end may bring it closer.
In the end, no one can tell the future. Did the last Dragonborn stop the end of the world? Or did he only stop Alduin's rebellion against Akatosh, and in doing so, bringing him back to the status quo as the World Eater? Who knows? Maybe all that the Thalmor are actually doing is giving people more arguments to preserve the world. Other theories, such as those of Sothasil, don't even talk about end times at all. Instead, they focus on the final state of being, known as Anuvanasi, where everyone becomes part of a great and total order personified by Anu, who is the very concept of stasis. But that is a tale for a different day. So the TLDR is this: Alduin does not actually bring the end of the world. People do. The world exists because people shape it into existence, and it will only end when enough people want the world to stop existing. What do you all think about this topic? While what I said in this video technically counts as theories, dare I even say game theories, I think that the connections are certainly there. So I'm a bit confident about what I just said. Hopefully, if anything else, I was able to pique your curiosity about an often overlooked topic in the community. And with that, have a good day. And remember, this could have all been avoided if Pelanol and Isgramor kept going.